Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are crime dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Only Murders in the Building, Season 4, Episode 4. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So let's break these parts down bit by bit. First and foremost, there's everything with Charles. I forgot, I was about to say what led them to the... because... I was about to say what led them to the concussion bars because they found out that Saz had an Instagram. It's interesting how, the through lines, because it's like, right, that came about because Oliver was looking at Loretta's Instagram and sees there's a photo of a guy with his arm around her, and now he's kind of getting worried and sad, which that whole thing ended up being really interesting to the point that he created a Finsta and started basically pretending to be Veronica just so he could get close to Loretta rather than asking Loretta straight up. I mean, because I get it, asking that question can be a very hard question to ask a significant other, because you're like, because then it's going to start coming off very possessive and obsessive, but it's like you kind of are, but you don't want your significant other to know that you are in that particular case. I've never been in that situation. I've never I doubt a lot of people have, but I'm sure there's got to be a handful of people who've kind of cyber stalked their significant other, just which not cool and not good. And Mabel was right from the very beginning, don't do this, Oliver. And the longer it went on, you're like, oh god, Loretta's gonna find out and it's gonna damage your relationship. I was about to say he deletes it, Mabel deletes it, but in the grand scheme of things, he's gonna end up saying something. I guarantee you, one time he's going to end up talking to Loretta, and he's going to say something that Loretta's going to be like, whoa, I know someone who said something just like that, Veronica, and then it's going to get exposed, and that's going to be a major, breach of trust, and it's going to probably do more harm than good. It becomes that self-fulfilling prophecy of you're so worried about your relationship being in danger that you end up being the one that ends up destroying your relationship. How I know that? Because I've been in that situation. Once again, years and years ago, I was in a relationship. I used to write poems, and I've told this story before where I've had a girlfriend. I used to write poems about me and my girlfriend at the time breaking up. She's like, why do you write stuff up like that? That's just how I am. I'm a sad boy. Very much like Howard, I'm a sad boy. But anyway, yeah, we ended up breaking up regardless, but it is what it is. And my point is, it just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy after a while. It was more a long-distance reason we broke up. But anyway, my point is, I could definitely see that blowing up in in Oliver's face is kind of the whole point of me going on that diatribe. So, but he ended up talking to Mabel, and I thought it was really, sad, because he's like, because I was wondering if that's what he was aiming for. At least Loretta looked at it like, oh, are you about to propose to me? But he shifted gears, and it turns out he was, in fact, trying to... I didn't know if that's where he really was intending to go, or whether we and Loretta were kind of misinterpreting. It's like, no, he did mean to go down that route, but he didn't want to, because he's like, well, one failed marriage is one thing, but another one, you start kind of wondering what's wrong. And he's thinking he's what's wrong, because for him, it's like, I don't want to fail Loretta, and I don't want to fail at this relationship, but it's like, I know it's an inevitability because I fail at everything. And you're like, that's really heartbreaking. That is just, once again, he's afraid that Loretta is going to be so successful. That's why he wants this movie to be successful, because he's like, if it can get made, it could make up for all the failures I've had in my life. I mean, once again, this also off the back of Death Rattle sinking, so it's just kind of it just reaffirms a feeling that's already been deep down inside of Oliver. And so this movie needs to be a success, so he feels like he's worthy of Loretta, because he feels like he isn't. It's like, oh, she's on to bigger and better things, and she'll leave me behind, and I'll be forgotten, and I don't ever feel like it's an insecurity thing at the end of the day. So that's kind of Oliver's journey this episode. I love the whole thing of just him trying to reduced. It's it has the brightness on his device super high. God, I love dark mode. I kind of stay in dark mode on any device I have, because I cannot stand how bright stuff can be, especially because I work on stuff at night a lot of times. So either way, and he's trying to like, and also he's got like the flash and the sepia on the photos and stuff like that. And Mabel's like, "Do I need to take your tablet away from you?" So Mabel in turn is, well, let me finish the point I was making before I went on my massive tangent. I mean, it's all relevant because I was still focused on Oliver, but circle back to, right, because of the Saz was following Loretta on Instagram. The last photo Saz took was at a bar called Concussion. It's a bar for stunt people, and they go there trying to find out anything they can about Saz, but they're not welcomed. And I love Charles trying to bribe the guys. Like, ooh, here's a 5. Here's a 1. Ooh, here's a 20. How about you give me change for it, and we can turn this, and we can add 6. It's just like, no, Charles. And I love that Mabel's just like, take his money so he can please stop this. And you're just like, oh, Charles, you're making me cringe so hard. I love it. But yeah, like the stunt people do not like, as they call them, the face people, because it's just like, right. I even love the whole, it's interesting perspective because it's like, right, the face is the most important person typically, and obviously the stuntman doesn't get the credit. In their eyes, it's like, well, we flip the script here because it's like, we're the stunt person, we're the most important person. You, the face, are the double. You know, it's not, Saz wasn't your double, you are her face double, you know, so. But it's like, yeah, because they think, like, yeah, the actors are all assholes and douchebags, so, you know, we really cared about Saz, and the sad thing is they can't perform their kind of, like, ceremony for a stunt person who passed because there is no body, so. Sadly, they got run out of there. We also ran into, I love it, it's Ben Stuntman Glenn. Because I was wondering whose voiceover that was at the beginning. I was like, who is that? I was like, it's not a character we know. And it's like, oh, the voiceover is Glenn. I was like, oh my God, that's kind of a neat way to have Paul Rudd in this season as well. So, which I was trying to think, I'm like, is this the first time I've ever seen Paul Rudd do an accent for something? I actually don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's stuff in his filmography that's like slipping my mind, but I'm trying to think like. Either way, Glenn is kind of crazy, and I love that he's blaming these, what did he call them, feckers? It's like, yeah, because of you, you know, we had a good thing going until Ben wanted to try bigger, better things like the stage, and then, bam, he got God. And then later that night, bam, again. And it's like, all right, because there was the twofold, the attempted murder and then the successful murder of Ben. But yeah, his stuntman's kind of crazy, and he was like, "Oh, guys, sorry about that. I kind of had to put on a show. But Charles, can I be your stunt person?" It's like, you're without a stunt double, I'm without a face. We can kind of work this out. Which I was like, okay, that's interesting, and I'm sure that'd be very sacrilegious. I mean, I'm curious, like for this, like how do the stunt people in this, you know. We don't have to take it to real life, but I'm talking about just in the only murders in the building world. Like, how do stunt people? I'm sure you. I wonder would that be sacrilegious too, especially when you found your one. It's like Saz and Charles have been a team for decades, so I think it is probably sacrilegious once someone loses their person that someone else tries to fill that void, or you find another person. I'm sure maybe amongst the stunt people that might be considered sacrilegious. I don't know, or maybe they're more copacetic with it. The fact is he went outside to ask, it makes me feel like they would not be down for that, so. And I also love the meta-ness of, oh, here's a stuntman performing stunts, but you also know a stuntman had to actually step in for stuntman Glenn playing those parts. So I was like, it's just this meta thing of knowing, like, oh, like those moments he's doing stuff like jumping in that dumpster. It's like, well, that was a stuntman filling in for Paul Rudd. So you're just like, once again, this show gets so meta sometimes it blows my mind when I think about it too much. The layers to it. But either way, Charles goes and meets with the chiropractor, which I love that it's like, oh, there's no word to describe her. And then Oliver's like, chiropractor. And he's like, huh. Glenn's like, oh, I guess there is a word to describe what she does. And so she was the last person that saw Saz because Saz went to get some injuries taken care of. And it's like, wait, Saz was in pain. It's like, yeah, from all the years of working for you. And for Charles is like the whole thing of like, I never noticed, because Saz was always just Saz, and but as Glenn put it, it's like, yeah, as stunt people, it's our job to never let that show. You gotta, you gotta keep it going. So, but I am curious, because Saz hasn't been Charles' stunt person for a while, so I wonder, are those injuries? I mean, he talked about it previously, but he's never really thought about like every blow that Saz has ever took for him, he took for granted. But it's like, could it still been like all these years later, these wounds were still giving Saz trouble, or was it more recent? Was something else coming up recently that led to it? And I think it's probably the revelation we get at the end of the episode, but we'll talk about that in a second. But either way, Maggie ended up helping Charles with some of like his stiffness, and ended up bringing up something really interesting where it's kind of like, you're bringing up like, Saz was kind of dealing with a partnership or whatever that needed to kind of end, and obviously Charles believes that relationship was himself, and he starts beating himself up because of it. And ultimately, once again, he's blaming himself for not recognizing how badly Saz was. It's so sad because, he has that dream in the beginning where Saz has a bullet wound, and it's like, I'm going to paradise. And then it happens again while he's getting the Dr. Maggie's doing her thing, and he sees her all banged up, all these different wounds. Once again, just everything accumulating of like, I just never took notice. I never was able to thank her for all that she's ever done for me, And even at the end, I thought was beautiful where he was like, right, they need a body. So it's like, right, he fills in for Saz's body for the funeral service at Concussion. I thought that was so beautiful, because it's like, right, Saz always took the blows for me, I can lay down for her. And I was like, I love that, and it's a sweet sentiment. And as everyone tells them their stories of Saz, they're breaking breakaway bottles against Charles' head, which I thought, like, wow, there's a case full, and everyone's got their story. So I'm like, is literally everyone going to do it? And then we get to like Glenn's story, and he talks about like, I was working on Jackass. I think he said Jackass 3 or whatever, and no, it might even been, I think he said Jackass Forever. So either way, and he tells this interesting story, which part of me was immediately like, okay, how does Steve-O feel about that? Like, sometimes when celebrities get referenced or mentioned to certain things, sometimes I don't think about it, but in this moment I was like, how does Steve-O, like, somebody has had, like, Steve-O has to have seen it. Granted, the episode just came out, so, but the internet, people are, inquisitive, but sometimes maybe they're just dicks and like, I want to know what Steve-O feels about this. So I'm sure he's seen that scene, or someone's going to show it to him. I'm not saying you should, but it's like the internet's the internet. Someone's going to like show that scene to him and be like, they said this about you. I'm curious how he react. I feel like Steve-O would just laugh about it. He'd be like, what? I'd never do that, I don't know. But it's like, Saz put him in a headlock until he pissed himself. Because like the entire time I'm like, just in the context of the meta-ness of it all, I'm like, has Paul Rudd or Jane Lynch ever crossed paths with Steve-O or anything Jackass related? I don't know. It just made me wonder, where I'm just kind of like, like maybe they can make that joke because there's like I don't know, like Paul Rudd and Steve-O are buddies or something like that, so they can make that joke. I don't know. I'm probably overthinking it. Not probably. I'm definitely overthinking, but it's just where my mind goes sometimes. And I love that the final bottle was real and poor Charles got hit. And it's like, that sucks. But it was all orchestrated by Glenn because he wanted, maybe it was an accident, but he kind of said like, this is what it's meant to be, because it ends up in a bar fight between the stunt people. And he's like, this is what Saz would have wanted. And just kind of lays back, and I was like, so was that intentional? And it's just like, was it intentional, or was it just a happy accident of like, it was a mistake, but hey, it has a silver lining. But the whole thing is, Charles ended up remembering a memory of, on the set of Brazos, that Saz told him what she wanted to do, what her plans for the future were, and that plan was to open up a stunt school. Like, she'd retire, which Maggie had talked about, but didn't know what Saz's plan was, and now Charles remembers. Because she didn't want to tell anyone, because she's like, yeah, the other stunt people will judge me and laugh at me. But she wanted to open up her own school. She's like, yeah, get like a trampolines, and obviously what they mean for her was just like, yeah, that was kind of the beginning of her career as a stunt person, and it's like, yeah, jumping on those and falling and her getting hurt but getting back up. So she kind of wants to teach that next generation, and kind of continue that legacy in that way. And I was like, oh, that's actually really beautiful. And because of that, Charles brings Mabel and Oliver there at the end of the episode, and now we find out like why she kept being like, oh, paradise, because it's in Paradise, New Jersey. So interestingly enough, at the very end, I'll circle back because there's still more stuff to talk about, but just going to the end of the episode, they end up showing up, and Bev, because I was trying to remember Molly Shannon's character, I believe her name's Bev, is there, and she's got a gun. I doubt it's a real gun. It's most likely a fake gun. No, it's not most likely. It's definitely a fake gun. So the question then becomes, well, why is she there? So there was like a relationship or whatever that Saz had to get away from. So it's one of two things. Well, there was a whole thing of she was supposed to be breaking up with Jan, but Jan's kind of under the impression that they were good. So either Saz was leaving Jan for Bev, or Bev was kind of like, either Bev was like a little more clingy and was kind of like thinking the relationship was more than what it was, and maybe that's what it is. Or it could be that Bev and Saz were kind of partners on this whole thing, on the whole stunt school situation. I don't know. Because the fact that she would come here means she knows about it. So there has to be some connection between her and Saz. So I'm curious what that is. Whether it is platonic or whether it was like romantic. Speaking of Bev, we had the whole situation with Howard, which poor Howard. I mean, first he gets stuck in a Dudanoff apartment because, he's asking Maeve, I literally said Maeve, Mabel, to help start their podcast, like Animal Jobs, but she's like, ooh, no, and she doesn't want to turn Howard down because she needs him to be here in case Dudanoff comes. And she's asking Howard to stay, and he's just like, kind of just sad boying it up in the bed with a pig. And he gets pulled away because they start pulling out like, oh, there's auditions, and he shows up, but the brothers sisters is what they're called, the sisters brothers. They did not like Howard's audition. And Howard was auditioning for himself. They're like, no, you're not going to play you. We're going to get Josh Gad to play you. I was like, that sucks. You can't even play yourself. It's just every time Howard seems to have some aspiration or dream or goal, it just feels like everyone kind of shits on him and just kind of steals the thunder and spotlight away from him. So you're like, poor Howard. And I love that he was going to drop the pig off to Mabel, but then it was immediately like, no, I can't trust you to do this, so... But in turn, Mabel ends up finding out the truth about the Westies. So it turns out their whole situation is Dudanoff really is in Portugal, apparently. Not unless we find out there's more to this and there's BS, or at least someone is BSing amongst them. But it seems like we finally find out what their like weird little thing is. It's not a cult. It's a leasing scam. Like these apartments, like Dudanoff has been like, subleasing them. And they've only been paying like $200 a month, and this has kind of been their like on the hush down low, and it's like, so that's what this is all about. And all like the bathtub meat is gifts from Dudanoff, and all they have to do is pay their $200 a month in rent. It's like, well, what about the woman on the ham radio? It's like, oh, that's Helga. That's Ellen's like ex-girlfriend, and she's kind of crazy. And the daughter's kind of like, oh, but you deserve better. I was like, does she like him or something? The fact that she said that, but it might just be like, yo, we're a tight-knit group because we're all here doing something illegal, so we kind of got each other's back, so that's why they're so like hush culty. But it's like, yeah, and they're willing to bring Mabel into the fold because they're like, yeah, Helga was kind of unhinged, and even I was like, oh, she's unhinged a little bit, but yeah. Yeah, but they're like, yeah, she was a different kind of weird, but you, Mabel, you could be the right kind of weird. Because, like, yeah, this place allows them to live and be themselves and never have to change. And in her own right, Mabel's weird, just like Oliver and Charles are both weird as well, you know? So, and it's also like, cool, the subletting situation is like pretty good. So, Mabel seems down for it, but we'll see what the next episode has in store for us when it comes to that. But that's where things currently stand on that front. But I still feel like there probably is more to go for when it comes to the Westies. I think there probably is more. Maybe the Helga thing, there's more to that than what we think. I don't know. There's just, obviously we're about to hit the halfway mark of this season. So it's going to definitely be interesting to see what was, after next episode, we'll be at the halfway mark of the season to see, like, where the rest of this goes, because we're still pretty early on. Plenty of twists, turns, and developments left. I'm excited to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.